Okay. Hi, Rachel. I'm actually very pleased that you're happy and have time for an interview with actually Pilgrim's teacher training,
Lovely to be
a
asked.
teacher trainer, it's well, let's what we like to do is make sure I won't do any more introduction because I want it to be your voice. So, if we could start, if you could just say a little bit briefly about yourself and your recent current work. Yeah.
So, well, I've been in ELT such a long time that it's sometimes a bit difficult to do it briefly. Um, but so basically, I've been in ELT for over 30 years and went through the route of teaching and then teacher training. I was a CELTA and Delta tutor for many years and also did teacher training at the University of Warwick. And then sort of, kind of overlapped, but I got into materials writing. And I've been freelance materials writer since 2008. And then about 5 years ago, it kind of struck me that although I was enjoying materials writing and I, was quite good at it and making a living, but I was really missing having a direct impact because you write books and they go out and you've no idea like what the impact of them is or not. And I had previously trained as a counselor and psychotherapist like 20 years ago. And I thought I kind of want to do something like that, but not that exactly. And so I did a coaching diploma. And then from that, developed the business I have now, which is working with other ELT freelancers and helping them with their businesses, both from a practical point of view, but also from a mindset point of view.
Okay, thank you very much. And I suppose you've kind of answered this, but just just to just wonder what it is that now that mainly kind of inspires you. If there's a highlight that you might like to mention. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think what inspires me is, there are so many great people working in this profession. I mean, not just as freelancers, but that's kind of who I've chosen to focus on. And so many of them undervalue themselves and are not kind of, that it's not about kind of that we have to earn, six figures or what have you, but people are really sort of struggling a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And, I want to help people actually use those skills and talents that they have so they can have, a more balanced life really and not be working quite so hard and be a bit more comfortable because they deserve it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've talked. I mean, I've read things that you've written and that you've spoken about and about how teacher education should be a vocation, really. Yeah. You've talked a lot about how this. I mean, it's kind of what you said just now as well about the we're also so busy and involved in doing things, and kind of the issue of burnout is such a big one. And just what would you like to say about that? Yeah.
Oh, I've got plenty to say about
I'm sure
that.
you have, and that's great.
Well, I mean, this is part really of what led to where I am now, certainly, because I had 2 episodes of burnout myself in the sort of early 2000s. And some of it was definitely caused by sort of external factors and, being asked to do too much. But I worked out eventually after like the second time that I also needed to look at me and my kind of people-pleasing tendencies and perfectionist tendencies. And also, yes, that kind of sense. I mean, you mentioned vocation, but there is a bit of martyrdom, I think, sometimes in ELT. That it's sort of, you see those memes like a good teacher is like a candle that, burns itself out for the good of others. And it's like, no, like, come on. This is not, this is not how things should be. And I think it does happen a lot, and it comes from a good place, but it is about recognizing it's not that we're more important than other people, but we are as important as other people.
Absolutely, yeah. Would you like to say anything about anything that actually supported you, in your own experience? Any kind of strategies that you used that helped you in coping personally?
So, well, I mean, I think it is ultimately, I do think it does come down to perspective and even things, like self-esteem and what have you. In terms of sort of strategies, a lot of the time when people talk about strategies for managing stress, they are sticking plasters. And there's nothing wrong actually with the odd sticking plaster, as in, oh, I'll take a day off here, or I'll join a yoga class, or, that's fine. And those things can help us. But we do need to get to the underlying root cause of it, which is often our mindset and our kind of beliefs about how we should be working and the value of what we're doing and so on. So I think like my top tip really is to go deeper into that stuff and get better at setting boundaries and being able to say no. And that does include saying no to things you want to do as well, because it's not just about poor oppressed people. It is also about people who are just really enthusiastic about what they do. And that's great. But we can still overdo things even when we're enjoying them. And I think people don't always fully understand that. They think if they're enjoying it, it's fine, but it's still stress.
Yeah. And I suppose some of the work that I've been quite influenced with somebody like actually Mary Delaney, I'm sure
yes,
of, and when she talked about we kind of stay in our comfort zone, and that's a good place, but it's really important to have a stretch, really, and engage in new things as well. But it's where stretch might lead to kind of strain, and that's where kind of alarm bells ring, and we have to kind of do something about that. And don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's interesting the actually thing about comfort zone. I mean, I worked a bit with Mary in Poland. She trained me up to do the Young Learners certificate.
Yeah. All right. Okay.
And great person to work, great teacher trainer.
Absolutely.
And so I think she's absolutely right when she talks about stretching. But I hear a lot about comfort zones, and what you generally hear is like, get out of your comfort zone. And we have to recognize, I think, that comfort zones are a form of protection for ourselves. And it's not really about being comfortable, it's about being safe.
Yeah.
And it's natural for us to have that kind of protection, and for our body to kind of go, oh, watch out when we try and step out of that. Having said that, actually, if we don't try and stretch that comfort zone, and I don't mean like leaping out of it, but stretch it, it does tend to get smaller and smaller and smaller. And then there's kind of less and less that we feel able to do. And that's not good either.
Yeah. And I presume you probably say, well, that then actually puts us on the road to kind of burn out and
it can do, because it sort of reinforces that there's something out there to be frightened of.
You mentioned already about your coaching experience, and I find that really interesting, because I also did a coaching course. I mean, when I experienced personal loss, I actually got I actually got support, which led me to actually do a kind of coaching in loss, but also in general. And I mean, I've always been interested in Carl Rogers anyway, in terms of and because he's talked quite a lot about education as well.
Absolutely,
So I just wonder what if you'd like to say anything more about your experience in coaching and how that supports, really.
Yeah, it's I mean, I find all of that kind of thing really interesting. I mean, the original diploma that I did was a Rogerian person-centered diploma in counselling and psychotherapy. And of course, that's a very specific approach, which is very client-centered, and that resonated a lot for me, because as a teacher and teacher trainer, it's we strive to be student-centered and to empower the students. And I think it was quite interesting for me when I did the coaching diploma, because that was much more, well, we looked a lot more at sort of what's the difference between coaching and mentoring and training. And actually, although I call myself a coach, I think only some of what I do is coaching, and quite a lot of what I do is actually mentoring and also training.
Yeah.
And actually that works quite well, I think, because sometimes people do just actually want to be told this is a really good way to do this thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes they do want to, or they need to explore something for themselves. So it's an interesting one, that like getting the balance right sometimes, I think.
Okay, so you would see that you would see kind of mentoring more in the framework of not always telling, but it's more in that sort of side of things, you know, of
Yes, I think
advice, and the coaching is more, well, you know, find your own solutions, really.
Yes, exactly.
With support, but yeah. Okay. Okay, you've meant, you know, I mean, you know, the work that I've seen, you know, and on your website, and you've talked about this whole about vocation, profession, and what often comes up is the issue of money. Yeah, and I just wonder, you know, if you'd like to say something about your approach in this, and what
Yes, let's talk about money. I like talking about money, partly because nobody ever wants to talk about money.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
It is a big taboo, I think. And I used to be very much the same. You know, I would say a lot of things like, oh, well, you know, the money's not important, and it's all about, you know, the experience and so on and so forth. And I do more and more feel that that is a bit of a big lie. You know, that it's a way of kind of almost keeping people in their place. And that's perhaps putting it a bit strongly, but you know, it's money itself is not important. All right, absolutely. However, freedom and autonomy and choice are super important for people. And we know that stress is very much related to lack of those things. And if you don't have enough money, you generally don't have those things. So, you know, for me, it's not actually really about the money. It's about giving people freedom and choice and autonomy. And, you know, that's why it's so important, I think, that we talk about it and we don't make it like a shameful thing to care about getting paid enough, because if you don't get paid enough, that immediately reduces your choices.
Yeah. And I mean, I know a lot of what you're saying is focused on kind of freelance, you know, and I'm a freelancer as well. But I just wonder if you any kind of ideas or tips, or you know, they might give for somebody who's kind of starting out in this. You know?
Well, I mean, for one thing, I mean, when I started my coaching business, I did work with employed people as well. And the number of people who said to me that they had never negotiated a salary, like ever. And I found that, you know, quite shocking, really, because I'm quite sure that the companies that were employing them had probably expected that they would. And of course, they're going to be happy if they don't. But, you know, I think that again says something about the attitude, like that we should just feel, oh, this is such a lovely, exciting job, and I'm not going to even sully it, you know. So my first tip then would be, absolutely, yes, you do need to negotiate your salary, and you need to recognize that over years of not negotiating, and therefore the next job is based on the previous salary and so on and so forth, you know, what a huge impact that's going to have on your life. And, you know, as you get older as well and you move towards retirement, if you haven't had enough money to put aside into a decent pension, you know, these things are important, and they're an aspect of self-care.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, we need to really see that as looking after ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with that.
No, I understand that as well, because you know, a lot of my time was on short-term contracts in the British Council, and and I was lucky enough to always get new ones,
Yeah.
but it wasn't really pensionable. Yeah, there was some elements, but it's only when I came back to the UK I was kind of lucky enough to kind of weave into that. Yeah, to,
But
which was really helpful.
a lot of people in ELT do not
yeah,
have pensions.
yes, yeah.
And I find that, quite scary, really.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, you've kind of talked about this, but you refer on your website and in the work you do to actually a growth mindset. And of course that can be a buzzword as well. And so, what does it mean for you?
So, well, I mean, I think it's something that's been talked about in education for a good decade now, hasn't it? I think it was maybe 2012 that Carol Dweck's book came out called Mindset. And it's not that nobody had ever thought of this before, but she encapsulated it really well. And what she means by that, as I understand it, is not kind of shutting things down, if you like, because of beliefs that we have. So, for example, I spent a lot of my life, I try not to do this anymore, but saying, oh, I'm no good at maths. I can't do maths. I'm much more of a languages person or what have you. And there's been research to show that people's results in a test are affected by having conversations like that before they go into an exam. So we can kind of create situations where we don't break out of our preconceived ideas. And I think it's really important in terms of teaching and students, because the students who have this, oh, I can't do this, or this isn't possible, or it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And it's also, I think, really helpful in terms of the people I work with and their businesses, because, I hear all the time things like, oh, it's just not possible to charge more than 20 euros an hour, or, and it's rubbish. But the fact that they believe that is keeping them stuck. So yes, I think it would be helpful for everybody to just check those thoughts that we get.
Yeah. So perhaps some of this is about how we kind of reframe our thinking as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's not that I'm not in the kind of pink fairy dust positive thinking will make everything go away
sure.
camp. But equally, negative thinking and deciding things are impossible will ensure that they are.
Yeah. You mentioned about mathematics, so that kind of I mean, I'm not going to ask you about mathematics.
No, I can't do maths.
I'm not going to ask you about mathematics particularly, but I mean, obviously your work is mainly in support for ELT, but I just wonder what implications there might be, or any experience for kind of wider education. Anything you'd like to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I decided initially, like a lot of people, I think I sort of felt, well, I can help anyone, and some of my early clients, I mean, I had a musician, I had an architect, all sorts of things. And the same things definitely apply. I just felt that because I know ELT so well, I could also, help more in that area. But I think, there are people who I know of who are working with teachers in mainstream education, and they have not dissimilar problems in a way. I think there is still a culture of, that you should be happy to work all of the hours, and that, you shouldn't ever complain about anything. And it's not dissimilar, I think. But I do think ELT is even worse. From my experience, than mainstream education.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that is because, even though that perhaps it isn't kind of a profession in the same way as other areas of work and education might be?
Yes, so I mean, I think it is a profession.
Yeah.
But I think it's not always seen as one.
Yes,
and I think that it does make it a bit harder, because you do have lots of situations where you're not necessarily treated in the way that a professional would be. You know, I can remember lots of occasions like that when I was teaching abroad, like coming back from doing a CELTA course to my 1-bedroom flat and finding that they'd moved somebody into it without telling me, you know, that kind of thing. And I think they just didn't think I would care, you know. So I think sometimes we're not necessarily perceived as professionals. And that actually is up to us, I think, to try and do something about that. Again, it's a boundaries thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay, this just as a last question, really is you know, and you know, I'm very happy for people to explore your website and find out more about your work as well. Yeah. But I just wonder if there's anything else you'd like to say that might be helpful, you know, for and supportive for anyone watching this, you know, the you know, and you know, who are you know, might be freelance, might be employed, but you know, but wanting to explore these ideas more.
Well, certainly, I mean, you know, on my website, I have a blog. I also started a YouTube channel this year. So those are both kind of sources of material, like food for thought, if you like, and help for anybody who wants to access it. It is aimed at freelancers, but I think quite a lot of it is applicable, you know, to anybody working in the field, or indeed anybody full stop, really. If you are a freelancer and you are looking for support, I do have a membership for ELT freelancers, which is great because we've got that community and you've got kind of people to, you know, get help from and run things past and go, is this reasonable or not, you know? And I do also have a group program, but that's more business focused. So that's about helping people learn how to kind of market their business and set it up in a way that works for them.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that's really great. I'm sure readers of the journal and people watching this will find this really good and food for thought, and will explore further. So, thank you very much. Yeah.